Yes, there was absolutely a form of Dutch Impressionism, or actually there was Dutch Impressionism.
I believe there was a Dutch Impressionism, but it was Dutch and therefore different.
To me, you shouldn't dub the Dutch landscape painters of the 19th century as Impressionists, because there are definitely similarities with the French Impressionists, but also quite a lot of differences.
If you visually compare the works by the French Impressionists with the Dutch artists who are defined as Impressionists, I think the answer is no. But if you think about the sources they use, especially literary sources, and the notions, what Impressionism is or entails, I think the answer could be yes.
I think that every country had their own type of Impressionism. The French Impressionism is about color and brightness and light, and Dutch Impressionism is also about light, but it's a subdued light, a silver light, and that's how we made it our own, basically.
So the appearances might be different, but the starting point, the idea of the art is the same.
Zu zeigen, wie die Künstler Ende des 19. Jahrhunderts nach Paris gegangen sind, dort die neue Kunst des Impressionismus kennengelernt haben und die neue Malweise mit in ihre Heimat zurückgebracht haben und dort dann diese neue Malweise mit den traditionellen Themen in Verbindung gebracht haben. Das ist das Thema der Ausstellung hier im Museum Barberini. Es wird insofern etwas Neues sein, als dass diese Künstler und Künstlerinnen, diese Werke sind in deutschen Museen kaum vorhanden. Und deshalb bringen wir diese Zusammenstellung von rund 100 Werken, die Haager Schule, der Amsterdamer Impressionismus, der Luminismus und zeigen so, dass es in den Niederlanden auch einen Impressionismus gab.
The first Impressionist exhibition was in 1874. And then at first, the Dutch were horrified. It's like, what is it? Or even worse, they didn't even see it. They just looked another way and focused on the naturalist art.
And therefore also Vincent van Gogh, a Dutch artist who lived in France, wrote in 1888, Mesdag and the others have got to stop poking fun at the Impressionists.
But during the 1880s, you see slowly that it is being seen, and then slowly that they start admiring it, that they start to understand it. And you see more and more Dutch artists going to Paris, reading about it, seeing the art in the Netherlands and thinking, okay, I need to go there to get the feeling, to be inspired, but also to follow training, which was supposed to be the best in the world at the time.
The Dutch artists were greatly inspired by the painters of Barbizon, French painters like Jean-François d'Aubigny, Camille Corot, Jean-François Millet, Troyon, others, who went to Barbizon and the forest of Fontainebleau, where they depicted the wooded landscape there, a very old forest, and they really depicted the soul of the forest, the trees, the water, the rocks.
Going to Paris, going to Barbizon and Fontainebleau, Dutch artists found something different, which thought, this is, what we really want to do. And that is what they took back home with them. And then it takes another 5 to 10 years before they really start adopting it.
But their style was less radical, less extreme, and they didn't want to opposite the traditional art world, but they wanted to be part of the establishment.
Light, I believe, played a defining role for Dutch artists, and this already goes back to the 17th century. Well, actually, Cézanne already said Rembrandt would make everything, the dullest, most ugliest subject, beautiful with one ray of light. And especially in the 19th century, Dutch artists wanted to portray themselves as the new old masters, the modern masters, and light became so important, especially also in landscape painting. And if you look at the Dutch landscape, it is dull. It is very uneventful. We don't have mountains, we don't have waterfalls. So it's a flat land, and all you have is the sky, all you have is light. And that really helped artists become very aware of the light.
The light in Paris has a sort of a golden hue. The light in the Netherlands is more silvery. So you will get a difference in the painting.
And it's interesting to see that they chose to paint light in gray tones by choosing contrast. They knew if you want to paint light, you have to paint darkness as well. So the dark and the light, that was for them like a constant choreography of grays. So by picking a gray silver light, they believed that was way more realistic and much more natural for our Dutch climate.
So the darkness and the greyishness is something because it's painted in the Netherlands. It has to do with that, I think.
The most important centers of art in the Netherlands were not focused in one place, like in France and Paris, but in 3 cities in the Netherlands. Amsterdam and The Hague, they are traditionally important art centers, have always been important. And Rotterdam became, especially at the end of the 19th century, became a very important center for the arts and where a lot of art dealerships established galleries.
Das Leben in den Dörfern war günstiger als in die Städte. Dann gab es meistens junge Künstler, die in die Dörfer gegangen sind. Die Künstlerdörfer waren in eine schöne Gegend und da war immer eine mittelgroße oder eine große Stadt in der Nähe und die junge Künstler waren untereinander. Den bekanntesten und ersten Künstlerdorf in den Niederlanden war Oosterbeek. Und Oosterbeek ist ein kleines Dorf in der Nähe von Arnhem. Die Natur war besonders in Oosterbeek. Es war anders als in der Rest in den Niederlanden, das ein flaches Land war, ein hügeliges Land. Am den Rhein gab es die Wiesen und Auen mit den Vieh und es gab Wald, dass die jungen Künstler selber entdecken konnten, wie sie die Natur malen wollten.
They just want to go into nature and depict what they saw and felt.
Ein anderer Künstlerdorf ist zum Beispiel Laren. Und Anton Mauve schrieb seine Frau, ja, das ist ja einfach zu erreichen. Man brauchte nur den Dampferstraßenbahn nach Laren zu nehmen von Amsterdam und ja, man ist da in eine halbe Stunde. Weil es so einfach zu erreichen war, kamen da vielen anderen auch hin, die in derselben Stile malte wie Mauve und Neuhaus. Aber es gab auch ein ganz anderes Künstlerdorf, Domburg. Da war alles anders. Domburg war schon ein bekannter Platz für Badegäste in dem 19. Jahrhundert. Und da kamen viele internationale Badegäste, auch viele Deutsche nach Domburg. Jan Toorop wohnte da und er organisierte Ausstellungen mit jungen Menschen, aber mit aller Sorten Kunst, nicht eine Schule, mit Luminisme, Impressionisme, mit Kubisme. Mondrian stellte seine Werke da aus, Jacoba von Heemskerk. Und sie konnte das verkaufen, weil es ein internationales Publikum gab.
So a lot of art-loving people would come and see these works and they could buy them during these exhibitions.
Und so ist Domburg ein total anderes Künstlerdorf dan Laren oder Oosterbeek.
In der Ausstellung zeigen wir Werke aus dem Zeitraum 1850 bis 1910. Und in dieser Phase, die wir zeigen, diese 60 Jahre, gab es 3 einzelne Epochen, die man voneinander abgrenzen kann oder Kunstrichtungen. Und es fängt an mit der sogenannten Haager Schule. Das sind die Maler, die sich in Den Haag versammelt haben.
Mesdag kaufte da in 1869 ein Haus. Mauve kommt da in 1871, Willem Maris, der wohnt da schon und die Haager Schule ist geboren.
The Dutch artists of the Hague School painted the surroundings of The Hague, such as the dunes and the sea, and also the lakes nearby. But they also went by train to other parts of the Netherlands, for example, the Veluwe region, where they could paint wooded landscapes.
Well, the Hague School really translated light to a tonal palette of subdued grays, colorful grays, warm gray, blue, yellow, pink gray, but it Grey was the basis of everything.
And the landscape, they didn't paint it with a narrative in it. It was just the landscape as they saw it, and they didn't want to idealize it.
And this was in contrast to their predecessors, the more romantic artists who wanted to idealize nature. And they loved that warm, golden Italian light.
The Dutch landscape artists of the Hague School, they did paint the personal sentiment in a landscape. They wanted to give a poetic atmosphere in it, and that's what you see in their tonal palette and their free brushstroke and their typical compositions with a lot of room for sky and water. At the end of the 19th century, a lot of countries had to find their own national identity, as well as the Netherlands. And how Dutch artists did it was not by painting history pieces, as they did in other countries, but they chose the landscape as a national landscape.
Die Landschaftsmalerei, das ist das ureigenste Genre der niederländischen Kunst, das aus dem 17. Jahrhundert kommt, dort mit Ruysdael und Rembrandt Höhepunkte hatte. Daran haben die Maler angeknüpft.
And a typical Dutch landscape painting shows a vast polder landscape with water expanses, and underneath the typical Dutch sky, cloudy. Because of all that water in our country.
Bei der Vorbereitung der Ausstellung habe ich mir die Sammlungen von fast allen niederländischen Museen angesehen und dabei festgestellt, dass es unzählige Bilder von Mühlen gibt. Windmühlen gab es in vielen Ländern, aber nur in Holland ist sie zu einem Symbol geworden, zu dem Nationalsymbol. Im 19. Jahrhundert gab es 9000 Mühlen in Holland, das heißt, man ist ihnen überall begegnet. Windmühlen sind nicht nur dazu da gewesen, um Getreide zu mahlen, um Sägewerke anzutreiben oder Papiermühlen, sondern, das ist der ganz spezielle Zweck in Holland, sie dienten der Landgewinnung, weil sie Wasser geschöpft haben aus den großen Seen, die eingedeicht wurden und das Wasser abgepumpt haben und auf diese Weise das neue Land geschaffen haben. Und in Holland sind große Teile unter dem Meeresspiegel und sie verdanken ihre Existenz erst den Windmühlen. Die zweite Phase in dieser Zeit, das ist der sogenannte Amsterdamer Impressionismus. Das fängt etwa in den 1880er Jahren an. Das ist dann eine andere Generation von Künstlern, die haben die Stadt als Thema gewählt.
The Dutch artists were fascinated by French writers in general, but Émile Zola in particular. And they adopt these ideas, you know, like the ideas of Émile Zola and the idea of impression, which they call Stemming or Stimmung, you would say here.
Die Hager Schule hatte die Stimmung von der Natur, von der Atmosphäre, von dem Licht. Die Amsterdamer Maler, das waren junge Maler, und die sagten, ja, Stimmung, das ist ja wichtig, aber das muss auch die Stimmung von der Person sein. Wie fühle ich mich, wenn ich ein Bild male? Und das muss das Publikum sehen und fühlen.
Und die haben angefangen, in der Stadt Cafés zu malen, das Nachtleben, Nachtszenen, wo das künstliche Licht auftauchte. Das war dann eine sehr städtische Kunst.
So it is the style of the painting, but it is also the theories and the thinking about it, which was absolutely important, yes.
The World Exhibition in Philadelphia in 1876, has been a very important exhibition for Dutch art in the second half of the 19th century, because it was the moment that Dutch art was introduced on a grand scale in the United States, on an international podium.
Dutch landscape painting was very popular as well in the US and Great Britain, because there was a new group of collectors there, the industrialists that had money, quickly earned, and they had new houses that they wanted to decorate in a way. And they wanted to mirror themselves to the 17th century merchants who also became rich quickly and who could buy those landscapes by Van Ruysdael, Koning and others. But those paintings were too expensive at the 19th century, so that's why they decided to buy 19th century Dutch paintings that looked alike but had a bit more modern atmosphere, and they were very welcoming paintings as well.
The American art market became one of the most dominant ones, most important ones for Dutch artists at the time.
Interestingly, the Scottish collector James Stats Forms, he was a railway engineer, so really working in modernity. But he typically bought these Dutch landscapes in which time stood still. They were static landscapes and usually did not depict that modernity. So apparently he liked to have that on his wall.
Nach 1900 etablierte sich dann eine weitere Epoche und die heißt Luminismus.
If you compare the Hague School to Luminism, it is almost unbelievable that these artists all claim to paint Dutch lights because it looks so extremely different. And yet they all believe that they did really base it on reality, on observation of light. And what happens that after the Hague School, with that real tonal grayish palette, new evidence comes to light about how the eye perceives light and what light is. So instead of doing dark versus light, they went for contrasting colors in the color circle, red versus green, blue versus yellow. And that was, for them, vibration of light, how we perceive it, should be painted. And if you look at these very bright landscapes, it's almost like after images, like they have been staring into the sun for so long that the sun creates this effect of seeing contrasting colors when you look at the blank canvas. And that sensation of seeing sunlight or bright light is translated beautifully through color.
Im letzten Raum zeigen wir die Entwicklung nach 1910 bis 1920 und dokumentieren so, wie sich in diesen 10 Jahren die neue Kunstrichtung aufgespalten hat in unterschiedliche Entwicklungen. Und wir zeigen Werke des Kubismus, des Expressionismus und auch der abstrakten Kunst.